Today, we're digging into one of the most bizarre and frankly terrifying mysteries in all of history. We're talking about a time when an entire city was gripped by an uncontrollable urge to dance, some literally to their deaths. So, let's get right into it. It all kicks off in the summer of 1518 in a city called Strasbourg. A single woman, who we know as Frau Troffea, just steps out into the street and starts dancing. No music, no reason, just pure, nonstop movement. I mean, that's the real question, isn't it? To get to the bottom of this 500-year-old case, we have to look past the just sheer weirdness of it all. We've got to understand what was going on in that city, and maybe more importantly, what was going on inside the minds of its people. Okay, so let's start with patient zero, Frau Troffea, and the absolutely unbelievable speed at which this affliction spread. You have to picture this. This wasn't a celebration. She danced for days on end, completely unable to stop. Her body was trembling with exhaustion, and all the authorities and doctors could do was stand there and watch, totally baffled. And just look at how fast this thing took off. What started with one person just exploded. Within a week, dozens had joined her. By the end of the month, 100. And by August, it was a full-blown epidemic, with the number climbing all the way to 400. And let's be crystal clear about this. This was not a party. Eyewitness accounts describe it as this agonizing, desperate ordeal. Dancers' faces were masks of terror and exhaustion. Their feet were bleeding from the constant movement. They'd collapse, only to struggle back up and start dancing all over again. So you have to ask, why Strasbourg? What was it about this specific city that made it so vulnerable to something so incredibly strange? Well, to really get it, you have to peel back the layers of the city. Yeah, on the surface, it seemed like a successful place. But underneath all that, the people there were living under immense constant pressure. It was basically a ticking time bomb. Just think about it. The people were starving, they were overworked, and they were living in this state of just perpetual fear. They were terrified of famine, terrified of diseases like the plague, and they were terrified of divine punishment from God. The entire city was at its absolute breaking point. So, with the city in a total crisis, the authorities knew they had to do something. But their big idea, their intervention, would turn this bizarre epidemic into a deadly catastrophe. Right, so the city's physicians get together and come up with a diagnosis based on the medicine of the time. They decide the dancers are suffering from something called hot blood. And their prescription? Well, the only way to cure it was to literally sweat it out. So their plan was more dancing. Seriously, they figured if they could create this organized environment, they could help the dancers burn off their sickness. So they actually built stages, hired musicians, and even paid healthy people to dance along with them. But this official seal of approval had the exact opposite effect. Instead of fixing the problem, it basically validated the behavior. It turned the whole thing into a massive public spectacle, which just drew more and more vulnerable, stressed-out people into the frenzy. And at its peak in August, the plague was affecting up to 400 people. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that was nearly 4% of the entire city's population, all dancing uncontrollably in the streets at the same time. This well-intentioned cure had turned a really strange phenomenon into a deadly one. People weren't just dancing anymore. They were dying from heart attacks, strokes, and pure physical exhaustion. Okay, so with their medical plan a complete and utter disaster, the authorities panicked. They ditched science and turned to the supernatural instead. The new theory was that this wasn't a medical problem at all. It was divine. They decided it was a curse from Saint Vitus, who happened to be the patron saint of dancers. And the belief was he could inflict uncontrollable dancing on sinners as a punishment. So the city does a complete 180. They totally abandon the medical strategy and go all in on a religious one. They start shipping the dancers off to a shrine, making them confess their sins, and they even banned all music and public dancing in the city. The goal was to appease this angry saint. And by early autumn, it started to work, or at least things started to quiet down. Whether it was the pilgrimage or just the fact that people were physically incapable of dancing anymore, the compulsion finally released its grip on the city. The madness was over. So now, 5 centuries later, we can finally put the pieces of this incredible historical puzzle together and try to figure out what really happened. Modern science has a few different theories to explain the dancing plague, but there is one that really stands out as by far the most likely explanation for this unbelievable event. This really helps us narrow it down. A popular theory was ergot poisoning from moldy bread, but that causes muscle spasms and convulsions, not coordinated, days-long dancing. A divine curse? Well, that's what they believed at the time, but there's no scientific evidence. That leaves us with the one theory that fits all the facts: mass psychogenic illness. And this is the key. Given the extreme, suffocating stress in Strasbourg, the starvation, the disease, the constant fear, Frau Troffea's dancing likely became an unconscious, physical outlet for that anxiety. And as other people saw her, their own minds, already pushed to the breaking point, latched onto it as a way to express their own unbearable tension. You know, the dancing plague is this profound and pretty chilling lesson. It shows us just how thin that line is between our own individual psychology and the behavior of the crowd. And it reminds us that under the right kind of pressure, that line can just dissolve. It's a lesson from 500 years ago that, honestly, still echoes today.